The bone hourglass was brought into the dragon court only when someone's remaining years needed a public grave. So when they dragged Lysara Ven barefoot across the throne hall and forced her hand toward the black sand, every noble understood the sentence. If she had stolen time from royal blood, the hourglass would bury her hand to the bone. If she had not, the court would still call her a witch, because innocent women did not survive relics made from dragon princes' ribs. Lysara knelt beneath the high obsidian arches with iron cuffs around her wrists and a torn gray cloak hanging from her shoulders. Her dark hair had come loose from its braid. One cheek was bruised from where a guard had struck her when she refused to bow quickly enough. Around her, the dragon court glittered in gold, black silk, and funeral jewels, every face sharpened by curiosity, disguised as justice. At the far end of the hall, Dragon King Aurelian sat on a throne of red dragon bone. He looked too young to be dying and too tired to deny it. His body was powerful, still broad shoulders, black ceremonial armor, a crown of dark gold resting above hair, the color of midnight, but sickness had carved shadows beneath his molten amber eyes. His right hand gripped the throne arm as if the room itself tilted beneath him. Every few breaths, faint gold light flickered under his skin, then dimmed, as though his dragonfire were trying to rise and failing before it reached his heart. Beside the throne stood Prince Corvain. The court called him heir. The bloodline called him cousin. Lysara's bones called him wrong. He was beautiful, in a polished, empty way, pale, gold hair, smooth face, black velvet mantle, one hand resting over the silver succession brooch at his chest. He watched Lysara with pity so gentle it could have been carved into a knife. Whenever Corvain leaned near the throne, the gold light under Aurelian's skin dimmed. Lysara noticed it once, and told herself fear was making patterns. Then it happened again. Lysara Ven, Corvain said, voice carrying easily through the hall. Lowborn scribe of the Western Archives, accused of stealing years from the Dragon King through forbidden time-blood witchcraft. A whisper moved through the nobles. Time-blood. The word had teeth. Time-blood witches had been hunted for generations because the court believed they could bend death, steal youth, and trap royal souls inside moments that should have ended. Lysara had spent her life hiding the faint hour-shaped birthmark beneath her left wrist, working as an archive scribe, because parchment asked fewer questions than people. Her mother had burned the hour-shaped mark once with a kitchen knife heated in coals, not to hurt her, but to save her. Better scarred than found, she had whispered. The mark returned by morning. Time always did. Lysara had never stolen a year from anyone. She had only read records too carefully. 3 nights ago, she had found a death ledger that recorded Aurelian's funeral date. Not predicted, recorded. With tomorrow's moon. Before she could copy it, Corvain's guard seized her. Now the ledger was gone, the king was dying faster, and the court had been handed a witch to blame. High Chronist Maelor approached the center of the hall carrying the bone hourglass. He was thin, old, and dressed in robes the color of ash. The relic in his hands was taller than a child, framed in curved white bone, its twin glass chambers held between carved dragon claws. Inside, black sand rested in the lower bulb. Rested. That was what frightened Lysara. An hourglass used for judgment should be waiting to fall. This one looked as if time had already finished. Maelor set it on a stone pedestal before her. The bone hourglass drinks only stolen years. If her hand is clean, the sand will remain still. If she has shortened the king's life, the sand will climb her bones and show the court what she took. Lysara lifted her head. That is not how time-blood works. The hall went silent. A few nobles leaned forward, delighted she had spoken. Corvain smiled faintly. Then you admit you know how it works. Lysara cursed herself. Aurelian's eyes sharpened from the throne. Not with mercy. With interest. She swallowed. I know old records. Time, blood, does not steal years. It witnesses the last moments of a royal death. Maelor's mouth tightened. Convenient scholarship from a woman accused of forbidden time theft. I am an archive scribe. You are a witch. She is both, apparently, Corvain said gently. And His Majesty is fading while she argues definitions. Aurelian coughed. Gold light flashed at his throat, then vanished. Corvain's hand hovered near the throne again, almost tender. The light beneath Aurelian's skin dimmed before the prince even touched him. Lysara stared. Corvain saw. His smile did not change. The court's fear returned at once. That was Corvain's gift, Lysara realized. He knew exactly when to make truth feel like delay. Aurelian looked at her. If you found something in my archives, speak clearly. The command should have been simple. But Corvain's chaza slid to her wrist, to the place where her birthmark was hidden beneath iron. He knew, or suspected enough. Lysara forced herself to meet the king's eyes. There was a ledger. Corvain laughed softly. There are thousands. One recorded your death before it happened. The hall erupted. Maelor struck the pedestal with his staff. Forbidden prophecy. No, Lysara said. Accounting. Aurelian rose halfway from the throne. The effort cost him. His face tightened, and his fingers dug into dragonbone. What date? Lysara opened her mouth. Corvain moved first. He took one step toward the king and placed a steadying hand near Aurelian's shoulder, not touching him, but close enough that the court saw devotion. Cousin, he said quietly, she is baiting you with fear. Aurelian's gaze did not leave Lysara. What date? Tomorrow's moon, she said. The words fell like a blade. For one breath, even the torches seemed to dim. Then Corvain's expression changed. Not much. Only the slightest tightening near his eyes. Lysara saw it. So did Aurelian. Before the king could speak, Maelor seized Lysara's chained wrist. Enough. Let the hourglass answer. Aurelian's voice cut across the hall. Do not force her hand. Maelor froze. Corvain turned, mild and wounded. If the king refuses judgment, the houses will say he fears the truth of his own death. There it was. The trap. Aurelian was Dragon King, but dying kings ruled under hungry eyes. If he protected her too soon, the court would call him bewitched. If he allowed the relic to condemn her, the witch would burn and Corvain would inherit a cleaner throne. Lysara looked at Aurelian. He looked back. For one strange heartbeat, suspicion passed between them like a bridge neither wanted. Then Lysara held out her hand herself. Gasps moved through the hall. She would not be dragged to the relic like a thief. If they were going to bury her, she would touch the grave standing. Maelor pressed her palm against the upper bone rim. Cold shot through her fingers. The bone hourglass woke. The black sand in the lower bulb shivered. Corvain smiled. Then the sand rose. Not falling, rising. It climbed upward through the narrow throat of the glass in a thin black stream, reversing itself grain by grain. The court recoiled. Maelor stumbled back so hard his staff struck the floor. But Maelor did not look at the sand when it rose. He looked at Corvain. The bone frame glowed pale white, then gold, then a deep, molten fire that painted the throne hall in shifting light. Behind Lysara, the air opened. A vision formed in golden flame. Dragon King Aurelian stood in this same hall beneath tomorrow's moon, older by only one night and dead on his feet. His crown had fallen. Black sand poured from his mouth. Prince Corvain knelt beside him, younger than he looked now, drinking gold fire from the king's final breath. The court screamed. Aurelian stared at his own future death. Corvain stepped back. Too late. The bone hourglass turned toward him. The black sand rose faster. And before the entire dragon court, the false heir's smooth face began to age. The false heir's face aged in front of the court. It happened slowly enough for everyone to understand terror before they understood truth. Fine lines cut into the smooth skin around Corvain's eyes. The pale gold of his hair dulled at the temples. The hand that had rested so elegantly over his succession brooch tightened, then trembled, as if the bones beneath it had suddenly remembered they were mortal. The bone hourglass kept rising. Black sand streamed upward through the narrow throat of the glass, each grain dragging another breath from the future vision blazing behind Lysara. In golden fire, Dragon King Aurelian died again and again in reverse, crown lifting from the floor back to his brow, black sand crawling upward from his lips into nothing. Corvain bending backward from the king's final breath as stolen gold fire returned to Aurelian's chest. The hall screamed, then went silent, because Aurelian stood, not fully healed, not strong, but straighter than before. The gold light beneath his skin flickered once, brighter. Corvain saw it. So did Lysara. High Chronist Maelor staggered toward the pedestal, face colorless. Cover the glass. No one moved. Cover it, he shouted. That panic did what Lysara's accusation had not. It made every noble look at him. Aurelian's eyes narrowed. Why? Mylor froze. Corvain recovered faster, his aged face smoothed not in skin, but in expression. The old calm returned, wrapped around fear like silk around a blade. Because forbidden relics answer witchcraft unpredictably, Corvain said. She has reversed the test. Lysara's hand was still pressed to the hourglass rim. The cold had sunk into her fingers, past skin, past bone, into memory. She tried to pull away. The hourglass would not release her. Aurelian stepped down from the throne. Every step cost him. She saw it in the tension near his mouth, in the way his right hand curled as if gripping invisible pain. Yet the closer he came, the brighter the hourglass burned. Corvain moved after him. The gold light beneath Aurelian's skin dimmed. Lysara acted before fear could stop her. She lifted her free hand and pointed at Corvain. The court turned. Aurelian stopped. The light under his skin steadied. For one dangerous breath, no one spoke. Then Aurelian looked at Corvain. Stay where you are. Corvain's smile thinned. Cousin, you cannot seriously mean to take direction from the woman accused of stealing your years. I mean to watch what happens when you do not stand near me. The words cut through the hall. Corvain's eyes sharpened. Mylor swallowed. Lysara felt the hourglass pulse under her palm. It was not judging her anymore. It was searching the moment, pulling at hidden threads wound through the court. A line of black sand lifted from the glass and curled in the air toward Corvain's succession brooch. He covered it with his hand. Too late. The brooch cracked. Inside was not silver. It was bone. A tiny carved sliver, yellow-white and threaded with gold, shaped like a dragon tooth but hollow at the center. Aurelian stared. What is that? Corvain looked genuinely offended. A family relic. The hourglass flared. Lysara saw a flash. Corvain standing alone in the Western Archive, holding the same bone sliver over an open death ledger, while black sand poured backward into his mouth. His face in the vision was old, older than now, older than he should have ever become. Then the years smoothed out of him, and somewhere far away, Aurelian coughed blood into a golden basin. Lysara gasped. Aurelian turned to her. What did you see? The hourglass tightened around her hand, demanding speech in exchange for sight. Pain climbed her wrist. The hour-shaped birthmark beneath the iron cuff burned hot, trying to shine through metal. She forced the words out. He has done this before. Corvain laughed. Done what? Survived accusation? Survived you dying. The hall went cold. Aurelian's face changed. No shock, recognition of something he had feared, but never named. Corvain's expression finally cracked. You should be careful, scribe. Time. Blood witches were burned because they mistook visions for law. No, Lysara said. They were burned because they made theft visible. The bone hourglass answered her. The iron cuff on her left wrist split open. Gasps rippled through the court as her hour-shaped birthmark appeared, glowing black gold beneath the skin. The old scar her mother had burned into it circled the mark like a failed cage. Time had returned, but so had the wound. Mylor whispered, Time, blood. Fear spread faster than fire. Several guards drew blades. Aurelian turned his head slightly. Anyone who raises steel against her loses the hand. The guards froze. Lysara looked at him, startled despite herself. His voice had not been soft. Nothing about him was soft. But he had placed a wall between her and the court before the court could decide whether witch blood mattered less than evidence. Corvain saw that too. His eyes narrowed with something uglier than fear. Jealousy, maybe. Or ownership denied. Your Majesty, Mylor said, voice shaking. If she is time. Blood, the law requires containment. Aurelian did not look away from Lysara. The law also requires my heir not to age when my death rewinds. Mylor's mouth closed. The hourglass shuddered. A second vision tore open behind them. This one did not show tomorrow's death. It showed last winter. Aurelian collapsed in a snow-lit corridor, coughing gold fire into his hand. Corvain knelt beside him with the bone brooch pressed against the king's wrist. Mylor stood nearby, holding a ledger open. He lost 3 months, Mylor whispered in the vision. Corvain smiled. Then give him a recovery story. Fever, poisoned wine, dragon exhaustion. The court loves names for what it cannot stop. The vision burned away. Nobles shouted. Aurelian did not. His silence was worse. Corvain lifted his chin. A dying king is easily frightened by tricks. Aurelian's gold eyes locked on him. And a false heir? Corvain's hand dropped from the cracked brooch. For the first time, Lysara saw the thing beneath his polished beauty. Not panic. Hunger. Old, patient, insulted hunger. You would have died without me managing the court, he said softly. The hourglass pulsed. Black sand rose faster. Aurelian swayed. Lysara felt the pull through the glass. The relic was not only showing stolen years, it was trying to return them, and the effort was tearing through whatever spell tied Aurelian's life to Corvain's body. If it rose too fast, both men might break. She tried again to pull her hand free. The hourglass held harder. Aurelian saw the pain cross her face. Release her. The bone hourglass did not obey. Maelor breathed, almost reverently. It cannot. Not until the stolen death is witnessed. Corvain turned on him. Maelor shrank. Aurelian heard. Witnessed by whom? The hourglass answered before anyone could. A third image formed in golden fire. Not the throne hall. A hidden chamber beneath the archives. A wall covered in ledgers. A stone basin full of black sand. At its center stood a mirror made of old dragon bone, reflecting Aurelian on a funeral bier, while Corvain watched from beside the corpse. Only Corvain in the reflection was not grieving. He was memorizing. He had already seen the king die. Lysara's breath caught. The vision turned. Inside it, Corvain looked directly toward her, as if the past had noticed the present watching. Then he smiled, and the Corvain, standing in the hall, began to bleed black sand from his eyes. Black sand bled from Corvain's eyes. It slid down his pale cheeks in thin, glittering streams, too dry to be tears and too dark to be blood. The court recoiled from him at last, not because Lysara had accused him, not because the Dragon King had questioned him, but because time itself had opened a wound in the face of the heir they had nearly crowned. Corvain wiped the sand away with 2 fingers. His hand trembled, only slightly, but Lysara saw it. So did Aurelian. The bone hourglass kept Lysara's marked wrist burning, where the broken cuff had fallen away. The hour-shaped birthmark beneath her skin glowed black gold, circled by the old scar her mother had burned into it years ago, better scarred than found. The words returned to her now with cruel clarity. Her mother had not feared time magic because it was evil. She had feared what powerful men would do once they found a girl who could expose stolen death. Aurelian stepped away from the throne. The gold fire beneath his skin brightened. Corvain moved closer. The fire dimmed. Aurelian stopped. The entire court saw it this time. Every noble, every guard, every priest. Even Maelor, who was still on his knees beside the pedestal, with black numbers crawling beneath the skin of his hands. Aurelian's voice cut low through the hall. Every time you come near me, something leaves. Corvain smiled faintly, though the aging around his eyes had deepened. You are dying, cousin. The dying feel loss in every room. The bone hourglass answered. A thread of black sand lifted from the glass and drifted through the air toward Corvain's silver succession brooch. He covered it with his palm, but too late. The brooch cracked open, revealing a hollow sliver of yellowed bone threaded with gold. Aurelian stared at it. What is that? Corvain's smile thinned. A family relic. Lysara touched the hourglass again. A vision tore open behind her in golden fire. The court saw a hidden archive chamber beneath the palace. Corvain stood there beside a stone basin full of black sand, older than he looked now, his hair white at the temples, his hands shaking with age. Maelor stood beside him, holding a ledger open to Aurelian's name. Corvain pressed the bone sliver to the page, and years rose from the ink like gold smoke. Far away in the same vision, Aurelian coughed fire into a basin. The gold smoke entered Corvain's mouth. His wrinkles smoothed. His hair darkened. His body became young again. The vision vanished. The hall erupted. Maelor tried to crawl backward, but the black numbers on his hands tightened like chains. Aurelian looked down at him. How long? Maelor shook his head. Your Majesty, how long has he been taking from me? The old chronist's lips trembled. Years, in pieces. fever by fever, collapse by collapse. Every time the court was told your dragon fire had weakened naturally, a measure had been drawn from you. Corvain's face hardened. I kept the kingdom stable. Aurelian turned toward him. The gold in his eyes burned brighter now, not because he was healed, but because rage had given his dying fire something to bite. You drank my life and called it stability. I preserved the throne from a king, too weak to hold it. A silence fell. The words could not be softened after they left his mouth. Lysara felt the hourglass pull again, not backward this time, down, into the moment beneath the theft. She saw the death ledger she had found 3 nights ago. Aurelian's name written in black ink. Tomorrow's moon, cause of death, royal fire exhaustion. Witness, Prince Corvain, heir confirmed before dawn. But beneath the ink was another line, hidden under black sand. Witness required. Her stomach turned. She looked at Corvain. You needed me. Aurelian's gaze cut to her. Corvain said nothing. Lysara stepped away from the hourglass, though pain still burned through her wrist. You let me find the ledger. You let your guards arrest me. You needed time blood to touch the bone hourglass, so the stolen death could become legal witness. Maelor bowed his head. That was answer enough. Corvain's expression became calm again, but it was no longer beautiful. It was old hunger, wearing a young man's skin badly. A death without witness can be disputed. A death exposed by a time, blood which can be condemned, redirected, and blamed. Aurelian understood before the court did. You meant for her to carry my death. Corvain smiled. I meant for her to prove she stole it. The bone hourglass cracked. Not fully. Only enough for black sand to spill upward and freeze above the hall in the shape of Aurelian's crown. Every torch bent backward. Every shadow shifted in the wrong direction. The golden vision returned, showing tomorrow's moon once more. Aurelian stood before the throne, dead on his feet. Corvain approached from the right, calm because he already knew where the king would fall. Maelor held the ledger. The court screamed too late. Corvain placed his hand on Aurelian's shoulder and drank the final breath from his body. Lysara stared at the vision. There it was. Not fate. Rehearsal. Corvain had watched this death before, practiced it, adjusted it, learned the exact breath when Aurelian would be weakest. Time blood could not change death, but it could reveal theft. Lysara lifted her burning wrist toward the vision. I witnessed the stolen path. The hour-shaped mark opened like a black gold eye. A thin, dark thread appeared between Corvain's bone brooch and the future Aurelian's spine. It was not a prophecy. It was a road death had been taught to walk. Corvain lunished. Aurelian moved first. No dragon fire burst from him this time. Only steel, only rage, only a dying king refusing to let another woman be used as the grave his enemy had written. His sword struck Corvain's blade before it reached Lysara, and the sound rang through the hall like a cracked bell. Cut it, Lysara said. Aurelian's eyes flashed to her. The thread, she gasped. Cut the path, not the man. Corvain's face changed. Fear. Real fear. Aurelian turned and drove his sword through the black thread in the golden vision. The hall screamed. The thread snapped. Corvain staggered backward as black sand exploded from his brooch. The future death behind Lysara convulsed, then shattered into sparks. The crown of black sand above the hourglass collapsed into the glass, filling both chambers at once. Aurelian dropped to one knee, breathing hard. Lysara moved toward him before she could stop herself. He looked up. For one breath, the whole court vanished. He was still dangerous, still a king, still a man whose first instinct might be command. But in his eyes now was something new and terrible. The knowledge that she had not stolen his death. She had stood inside it and pulled him away from the path prepared for him. Corvain laughed from behind them. It was hoarse, aged, furious. You broke one ending, he said. Do you think I only wrote one? The bone hourglass turned by itself. A hidden line appeared in the glass, written in black sand. If the king does not die by stolen years, the witness will be named the cause. Lysara went cold. Aurelian read it. So did the court. Corvain smiled through blood and sand. Now choose, cousin, he whispered. Condemn the time, blood witch, or die beside her. The words hung over the throne hall, like a blade waiting for permission to fall. Condemn the time blood witch, or die beside her. Every noble in the dragon court turned toward Aurelian at once. That was the cleverest cruelty of Corvain's trap. It did not only threaten the king's life, it offered the court a familiar shape for fear. A witch had touched the bone hourglass. The king's death had broken open. Black sand had risen. A forbidden birthmark had burned on a low-born scribe's wrist. If Aurelian condemned Lysara now, the court could gather all its terror and place it neatly on her body. They wanted that. She felt it. The hunger for a simple culprit moved through the hall faster than flame. Lysara stood beside the cracked hourglass, wrist still glowing black gold, her fingers numb from the cold the relic had left in her bones. She could feel the death record shifting in the glass, trying to settle into law. If the king does not die by stolen years, the witness will be named the cause. Aurelian slowly rose from one knee. His face was pale. His dragonfire still flickered unevenly under his skin. He looked like a man standing at the edge of his own grave, and perhaps he was. Corvain saw the court watching and smiled. "Your Majesty," he said, voice rough but carrying, "the law is generous. It gives you a path. Name her cause. Let the bone hourglass take the witch who touched your death, and the succession stabilizes. Refuse, and every noble house will say you chose forbidden blood over the realm." Lysara looked at Aurelian. She expected suspicion, anger, calculation. She had spent her life around records and rulers long enough to know survival often wore a noble face while handing someone else to the fire. But Aurelian's eyes were on the black sand line in the glass. Not on her wrist, not on the witch mark. On the wording, "The witness will be named the cause," he said. The hourglass pulsed. "Yes," Corvain whispered. "The relic has judged." "No," Aurelian said. "It has been taught." Corvain's smile thinned. Aurelian looked at Lysara then, and the force of his gaze struck through her exhaustion. "Can you show who wrote that rule?" The court stirred. Lysara's throat tightened. The hourglass had already taken so much from her body that even standing felt like defiance. But this was the right question. Not whether she was dangerous. Not whether her blood was clean. Who wrote the rule that made her guilt useful? She lifted her marked wrist. The old scar around the hour shape split brighter. "I can try." Aurelian's jaw tightened, but he did not tell her no. That mattered. Lysara pressed her fingers against the black sand line inside the glass. Pain went through her like a hook pulled backward through time. The throne hall vanished. For one breath, she stood in a chamber of pale bone shelves and ash-covered ledgers. Corvain was there, younger-faced, with Maelor beside him. The bone hourglass stood between them, whole and silent. Maelor's hand shook as he wrote a line into an ancient rulebook. If a stolen royal death is witnessed by forbidden blood, the witness may be named cause before the court. Corvain leaned over his shoulder. "May?" Maelor swallowed. "Old law requires uncertainty. It must allow challenge." Corvain placed the bone brooch against the page. Black sand seeped into the ink. The word May darkened. Changed. Will. The vision snapped. Lysara stumbled back into the hall with a gasp. He altered the law. A murmur broke open. Corvain's face hardened. Maelor's eyes filled with horror, because he had already remembered what he hoped the hourglass would never show. Aurelian turned to him. "Is that true?" Maelor was trembling. The original law allowed challenge. "And now?" The chronist looked down at his black-numbered hands. "Now the witness becomes cause automatically if the king refuses succession." Corvain barked, "Because refusal during death crisis is treason." "No," Lysara said, voice shaking but clear. "Because you needed any woman with time. Blood to become the knife after you stole the wound." The bone hourglass rang once. The altered line inside the glass cracked. Aurelian stepped toward Corvain. "You did not only plan my death, you prepared her guilt before she ever entered this hall." Corvain's ruined face twisted. The court needed a reason it could survive. "The court," Aurelian said, "has survived too many reasons written by cowards." Corvain's eyes flashed. He looked past Aurelian to the nobles. "Listen to him. He stands beside the witch while his dragonfire fails. You all see it. He is already compromised." Several lords shifted. Aurelian did not turn toward them. "Then look well." He removed the dark gold crown from his head. The hall froze. Lysara stopped breathing. Aurelian walked to the bone hourglass and placed the crown on the pedestal beside it. His hand was steady, though she could see the sickness pulling at his body. I will not keep a crown that survives by naming witnesses as criminals. The black sand inside the hourglass surged. Corvain shouted, "Do not." Aurelian cut his palm on the edge of his own crown and pressed his blood against the cracked glass. Gold fire entered the black sand. The hourglass screamed. The altered law burned inside the chamber, first black, then gold, then white as bone ash. The word will cracked apart, and beneath it the original line returned. May be challenged by royal blood and true witness. Lysara felt the relic turn toward her. True witness. Aurelian held out his bloodied hand. Not commanding. Waiting. The court watched the dying Dragon King offer his hand to the witch they wanted him to condemn. Lysara looked at that hand, then at Corvain, then at every noble who had already half decided she would be easier to burn than believe. She placed her marked wrist against Aurelian's blood. The hourglass exploded with golden fire. Not outward, upward. Above the throne hall, the stolen death record opened for all to see. Every altered date, every false recovery, every theft disguised as royal illness. Every rule Corvain had changed, so Lysara would become the cause if Aurelian resisted. The nobles stared as their clean succession became a murder ledger. Corvain stuttered. The stolen years inside him began to rot. His face aged again, faster now. The skin at his throat loosened. His pale gold hair whitened strand by strand. But his eyes burned with the hatred of a man who would rather destroy a kingdom than lose the future he had rehearsed. He lifted the shattered bone brooch. "If I cannot inherit his death," he rasped, "then I will spend every stolen year at once." Maelor screamed, "No!" Black sand burst from Corvain's chest and raced toward the throne hall doors, toward the nobles, guards, priests, servants, every living body close enough to become fuel. Lysara understood instantly. He is taking from everyone. Aurelian reached for his sword, but his knees nearly buckled. Lysara caught him. For one breath, the court saw not a witch seducing a king, but a woman keeping him upright while death tried to drink the room. The bone hourglass pulsed between them. Aurelian's blood. Lysara's mark. True witness. She lifted her wrist and shouted over the screaming sand. "Then witness all of it." The hourglass turned upside down by itself. The black sand froze inches from the court's throats. Every stolen year hung in the air like 1,000 tiny stars, and inside each grain, Corvain's face appeared. Every stolen year hung in the air like 1,000 tiny stars. The black sand had frozen inches from throats, eyes, open mouths, reaching hands. Nobles stood trapped in the shapes of their own fear. Guards held swords half raised. Priests clutched useless charms. At the center of it all, Corvain's face appeared inside every grain. Young, old, laughing, starving, watching Aurelian die, rewriting dates, whispering over ledgers, drinking gold fire from a king's breath, practicing grief before black glass until it looked holy. The court could no longer call it one vision. It was too many, too consistent, too ugly. Lysara stood beside the bone hourglass with Aurelian's blood drying against her marked wrist. The hour-shaped birthmark burned so fiercely she thought the skin might split. Aurelian stood close enough that his shoulder brushed hers, pale but upright, his crown still lying on the pedestal beside the relic. Corvain staggered beneath the weight of his own exposed years. "Stop this," he rasped. The hourglass did not. Each grain of sand turned outward, showing another stolen measure. 3 months pulled from Aurelian after a winter fever. 7 weeks taken during a border council. 2 years hidden inside a false recovery after the king collapsed in the southern chapel. Every theft had been small enough for the court to explain away. Together, they were murder. Aurelian's voice was low. "How much of my life did you take?" Corvain's mouth twisted. "Enough to keep you useful." The hall went silent. There were answers that revealed guilt. Then there were answers that revealed the soul beneath it. Lysara felt the hourglass pull again, not at her blood this time, but at her choice. The relic could hold the stolen years in witness, but it could not decide what to do with them. Time blood did not punish. It revealed. Judgment belonged to the living. which meant the court could still try to twist the truth if fear gave them room. Maelor crawled toward the pedestal, both hands blackened with dates. Your Majesty, the stolen years can be returned. Aurelian turned sharply. How? Maelor looked at Lysara. The answer was there before he spoke. No, Aurelian said. Lysara almost smiled despite the pain. You do not know what he was going to say. I know too many men have looked at your blood tonight when they wanted a lock opened. Maelor bowed his head. A time. Blood witness must guide the return. If the stolen years enter the king wrongly, they may burn his dragonfire apart. Aurelian's eyes stayed on Lysara. And what does it cost her? Maelor hesitated. Corvain laughed weakly. There is always the correct question. Lysara looked at the frozen sand. What does it cost? The witness must stand inside each stolen year as it returns, Maelor whispered. She will feel every theft, every fever, every collapse, every death rehearsed through him. Aurelian's jaw hardened. No. This time, the word was not fear alone. It was command. Lysara looked at him. You cannot rule if those years stay outside you. I cannot call it justice if it uses you as a bridge until you break. The words struck her harder than she wanted them to. For most of her life, her body had been treated like evidence waiting to be seized. Her mark, her blood, her archive work, her silence, her survival. Even her mother's scar had been a desperate attempt to make her less useful to cruel men. Now the Dragon King refused a cure because it might cost her pain. That should not have mattered. It did. Corvain saw it and smiled. Touching. Let the king die nobly then. The court will sing of his restraint while choosing the next heir from men who do not hesitate. Aurelian reached for his sword. Lysara caught his wrist. His fire flickered under her fingers, not dimming, not draining, but answering. Do not give him anger, she said. He knows what to do with that. Aurelian looked down at her hand on him, then at her face. What do you choose? The question moved through the hall more powerfully than any command. Lysara turned toward the court. Every eye was on her now. Some still feared her, some looked ashamed. Some were already calculating how to survive the fall of Corvain's future. Let them. She was done shrinking so comfortable people could pretend not to see the knife. I choose to return what was stolen, she said, but not as sacrifice. The hourglass pulsed. She looked at Maelor. You said the witness must guide the years. You did not say she must carry them alone. Maelor frowned through fear. No living court has attempted shared witness. Then this court will learn something useful. Aurelian understood first. No. Yes, Lysara said. His eyes flashed. You would have me feel every death he rehearsed? It was your death. It was his crime. And my witness. Her voice softened, but did not weaken. If you want to stand beside truth, stand inside it. For a moment, he simply stared at her. Then something changed in him. Not surrender. Respect deep enough to hurt. Aurelian placed his bloodied palm over the bone hourglass. Lysara placed her marked wrist beside it. The relic flared black gold between them, and the frozen sand began to move. One grain entered Aurelian. One entered Lysara. Pain struck them both. Aurelian went rigid. Lysara bit down on a cry as fever, weakness, stolen breath, and cold palace floors rushed through her body. She felt Aurelian collapsing alone in corridors, felt his dragonfire pulled away in secret, felt Corvain waiting just close enough to look loyal while stealing life by inches. Beside her, Aurelian made no sound, but his hand found hers on the glass. Not to restrain, to endure. Together, the stolen years returned in waves. Gold fire poured back beneath his skin, not violently now, but like a river finding its true bed. Black sand burned through Lysara's veins and out again, leaving scars of memory but not chains. The court watched the dying Dragon King stand taller with every breath while the secret witch stayed on her feet beside him, refusing to collapse into the role Corvain had written. Corvain screamed as the last grain left the air. It did not enter Aurelian. It hovered between them, larger than the others, black at its center and gold around the edge. Lysara knew what it was before the hourglass showed it. The final death. Tomorrow's moon. The moment Corvain had rehearsed most. Aurelian looked at her. Can it be returned? No, she whispered. It was never taken. The grain opened. Inside it, The court saw Aurelian standing beneath tomorrow's moon, not dying from stolen years now, but facing Corvain with sword drawn. In that possible future, the king survived the theft, but chose to duel the false heir alone, and was stabbed through the heart because he believed the final justice had to be his. The vision vanished. Aurelian's face tightened. Corvain smiled through tears of black sand. There, you see, I did not need to steal that one. He walks to death willingly when pride wears a crown. Lysara turned to Aurelian. Do not. The word came out softer than she intended. The hall heard it anyway. Aurelian's gaze held hers. He murdered my years. Yes. He tried to make you carry my death. Yes. He will do worse if he breathes. Then do not fight him where he has watched you die. The bone hourglass rang once. Not warning. Agreement. Aurelian looked at Corvain, then at the court, then back to Lysara. His hand tightened around hers. What does true witness require? Lysara looked at the hourglass. The answer rose in the black gold sand. Not vengeance. Record. She lifted her head. Let every stolen year remain visible. Corvain's smile died. Lysara stepped toward him, Aurelian beside her. You wanted to live through the king's death until you owned the cleanest future, she said. So you will live through every theft without owning any of them. The bone hourglass turned toward Corvain. All the returned memories entered him at once, not as youth, not as strength, but as record. Every year he stole, every false recovery, every rehearsal of Aurelian's death, every court lie, every altered law, every moment he watched and adjusted and stole again. Corvain collapsed. His body did not turn to dust. That would have been too merciful. He remained alive, aged beyond dignity, shaking beneath the weight of time he could no longer spend. Aurelian stood over him, dragonfire restored but controlled. The court waited for execution. Instead, the Dragon King looked at Mylor. Bring every death ledger to the throne hall. Maelor bowed so low his black-numbered hands touched the floor. Aurelian turned to the nobles. No succession will be spoken tonight. No heir will be named from fear. Every year stolen from this crown will be read aloud before the houses. Then he looked at Lysara, not as a king looks at a subject, not as a dying man looks at a cure, as a man standing beside the one person who had entered his death and refused to let it be used against either of them. And Lysara Ven, he said, voice carrying through the broken hall, will not stand trial again. A noble lord dared to whisper, she is time, blood. Aurelian's eyes turned gold. Yes, he said, that is why the truth survived. The bone hourglass settled. For the first time, the black sand neither rose nor fell. It hovered between chambers like a breath held at peace. Then, inside the glass, tomorrow's moon appeared. Not as a death date, as an unanswered door. Tomorrow's moon hung inside the bone hourglass like an eye waiting to open. No one in the dragon court moved. The black sand hovered between the glass chambers, neither rising nor falling, as if time itself had paused to see whether the living would finally choose differently. Around the throne hall, nobles stood amid broken visions and cooling gold fire, their faces stripped of the certainty they had worn when Lysara was dragged in as a witch. Corvain lay near the pedestal, ancient and shaking, his body bent beneath every year he had stolen and every death he had rehearsed. He was alive but not free. Each breath rattled with black sand. Each time he tried to lift his head, tiny hourglasses flickered beneath his skin, forcing him to remember another theft. Aurelian stood beside Lysara, restored enough to be terrifying but not untouched by what had happened. Gold dragonfire moved beneath his skin again, controlled and steady, yet his face was pale from the years returning too quickly. His crown still rested beside the hourglass, blood drying along its dark gold points. Maelor returned with the first death ledger in trembling hands. Then another chronist came, then another. Soon the throne steps were covered in books. Black ledgers, red ledgers, ash-bound ledgers, narrow bone tablets wrapped in royal silk. Records of illness, recovery, succession, royal weakness, delayed funerals. All the neat language that had made murder look like administration. Aurelian looked at them with cold disgust. Open them. Maelor hesitated. Your Majesty, some are sealed by old succession law. Lysara's laugh came out quiet and bitter. Old succession law seems very comfortable around theft. A few nobles flinched. Aurelian did not smile, but his eyes moved to her for one breath. Open them. Maelor obeyed. The bone hourglass pulsed as the first ledger opened. Ink lifted from the pages and turned into black gold flame in the air. Aurelian Vare, winter fever, 3 months drawn. Aurelian Vare, southern collapse, 7 weeks drawn. Aurelian Vare, dragonfire failure during council, 2 years redirected. Each line burned above the hall. Each theft had a witness mark beside it. Maelor's, Corvain's, and beneath them, hidden under layers of ash, the mark of a council house that had approved the transfer. The court began to break in pieces. Not loudly at first. A noblewoman made a choking sound when her house seal appeared beside a stolen recovery. A lord cursed and tried to step backward, only to find guards behind him. A priest covered his mouth as if silence could swallow his own name before the fire spoke it. Aurelian watched without mercy. Lysara watched without satisfaction. That surprised her. She had imagined, in all her quiet years of copying records and hiding her wrist, that truth would feel clean when it arrived. Instead, it felt heavy. Every exposed name was another reason the court would fear her. Every revealed theft made her more useful, more dangerous, more likely to be called necessary, until necessity became another cage. Aurelian seemed to sense the change in her. "You are thinking of running," he said quietly. She looked at him. "I am thinking that courts often love witnesses only until the witness looks at them." His gaze sharpened. Before he could answer, Corvain laughed. The sound was weak, but poisonous. "She understands already. Keep her close, cousin. Put a guard at her door. Name it protection. Name it honor. Soon she will be another relic beside your throne." Aurelian's expression hardened. Lysara felt the words strike where Corvain intended, because they were not entirely empty. Power had a way of turning gratitude into possession. She looked at Aurelian. He looked back. For one dangerous moment, the hall disappeared again, and only the question remained between them. Would he protect her from the court, or keep her for it? Aurelian turned away first. Not from guilt, from decision. "Lysara Ven is not property of the crown," he said. The hall stilled. "She will not be housed under guard unless she asks for protection. She will not be commanded to witness. She will not be named court witch, royal relic, or succession tool." A noble lord protested, "Your Majesty, her blood may be the only way to verify the corrupted ledgers." Aurelian's gold eyes cut to him. "Then the court will learn to ask." The words struck Lysara harder than they should have. Ask. Such a small word. Such a rare one. The bone hourglass brightened. Inside the glass, tomorrow's moon shifted. The unanswered door widened, showing not Aurelian's death now, but the throne hall at dawn. Corvain bound before the court, ledgers burning overhead. Lysara standing beside the hourglass with blood on her wrist. Aurelian crownless before the houses. Then the vision darkened. A blade appeared behind him. Not Corvain's hand. Someone else. Lysara stepped closer to the glass. There was another attempt. The court recoiled. Aurelian did not. "Show it." The hourglass trembled. Black sand gathered into the shape of a hand wearing a ring of red dragon bone. The hand held a narrow blade soaked in gold fire. Maelor gasped. "That is a royal council ring." All eyes turned toward the gathered council lords. One man did not move quickly enough. Lord Savain, head of the succession council, stood near the second pillar with his lips pressed thin and his right hand hidden inside his sleeve. Aurelian saw. "So," the king said softly. Corvain was not the only airmaker in the room. Savain moved. He seized the nearest guard's sword and lunged not toward Aurelian, toward Lysara. Aurelian reached for her, but Lysara had already seen the path in the hourglass. The blade would not kill her. It would cut her mark, spill time blood onto the ledgers, and make every exposed record unstable. She stepped sideways. The sword sliced through her torn sleeve instead of her wrist. Aurelian's dragonfire struck Savain before the second blow. The council lord crashed to the marble, smoking but alive, the red dragon bone ring glowing on his finger. Guards seized him at once. The bone hourglass turned toward the ring. A new line burned in the air. Emergency succession requires a dead king, a condemned witness, and a loyal council hand. Lysara stared at the words. Corvain had not planned only to blame her. He had planned to make the entire court participate in making the lie legal. Aurelian looked at the council. Every lord lowered his eyes, except those too guilty to know where to look. The king lifted his crown from the pedestal. For a breath, Lysara thought he would put it back on. Instead, he placed it before the bone hourglass. "Then let succession wait," he said, "until every loyal hand is proven clean." The hourglass flared. The crown cracked, not breaking, opening. Inside it, black sand poured from hidden grooves in the metal, spilling onto the marble in a ring around Aurelian's feet. The court gasped. Lysara went cold. Even the crown had been altered. Aurelian stared down at the sand, face unreadable. Corvain smiled from the floor with ruined lips. "You see, cousin?" he whispered. "You were never dying near the throne." The black sand rose from the opened crown like smoke. "You were dying because of it." The crown was killing him. Not Corvain alone. Not fever. Not weakness of blood. The crown. Black sand rose from the opened metal in a thin, poisonous spiral, curling around Aurelian's boots as if it knew the shape of his body too well. The hidden grooves inside the dark gold points pulsed with old time marks, each one cut so finely that no court jeweler would have noticed unless he knew what death looked like when it was engraved. Aurelian stared at it without moving. For one terrible breath, Lysara saw not the Dragon King the court feared, but a man realizing every ceremony of his reign had placed the knife back on his head. Every coronation anniversary, every council oath, every public blessing where he had worn that crown while nobles praised his endurance. Every time, the crown had been taken from him. Corvain laughed from the floor, old and ruined, but still cruel enough to enjoy the wound. "You thought I needed to stand near you. I only needed you to rule." Aurelian's jaw tightened. "Who altered it?" Corvain smiled. The bone hourglass answered before he could. Black sand inside the opened crown rose into the air and formed a ring of faces. Corvain, Maelor, Lord Savain, 3 council lords, 2 crown, forgers, and a veiled priestess of the succession temple, not one villain, a system. A court that had learned to drain a king and call it continuity. Lysara felt cold anger settle in her chest. Aurelian had been dying because every man who feared instability had preferred a weakened king they could manage over a living king they could not control. Maelor bowed his head, voice breaking. "The crown began as a stabilizer. After your first collapse, Corvain said your dragonfire would kill you if it surged too high. We thought it was drawing excess fire." Aurelian looked at him, and when I kept fading, Maelor shut his eyes. Lysara answered for him. They decided a slower king was easier. The hourglass pulsed. Truth accepted. Aurelian bent and picked up the crown. The court flinched as if he had lifted a venomous snake. Lysara stepped forward. "Do not put it on." He looked at her, and something almost tender moved beneath his exhaustion. "I am not that eager to die." Then he turned to the court. For the first time since the trial began, Aurelian did not look sick. He looked dangerous. "This crown was used to drain my life, weaken my rule, and prepare a false succession. Every oath sworn through it is now suspect. Every council seat that touched this theft will answer." Lord Savin, smoking under guard, lifted his head. "Without the crown's stabilizing right, your dragonfire may burn through you before winter." Aurelian's mouth curved without warmth. "Then I will burn honestly." Lysara's mark flared. The bone hourglass turned toward her. She knew what it wanted before the sand moved. The crown's theft had been revealed, but not undone. Aurelian's years had returned in part, yet the crown had left hooks inside his fire. If those hooks stayed, the court could build another theft around them. If they were torn out too quickly, his dragonfire might surge through a body weakened by years of draining. She looked at the hourglass. "No." Aurelian heard the word and turned. "What?" "It wants another witness." His eyes darkened. "No." This time, the refusal came with no hesitation. Lysara lifted her chin. "You do not even know the cost." "I know enough." The hall watched them in stunned silence. The Dragon King and the Time, Blood Witch arguing over who was allowed to suffer for the truth. Aurelian stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You have opened my death, my ledgers, my crown. I will not let the court teach you that saving me is your purpose. The words struck deep enough to hurt. Lysara wanted to look away. She did not. "And I will not let you mistake refusal for protection," she said softly. "If the hooks stay in you, they will use them again. Then we remove them another way. There may not be another way." His gold eyes held hers. "Then we make one." The bone hourglass rang once. Not rejecting him. Listening, Aurelian placed the altered crown on the pedestal before the relic. Then he cut his palm again, deeper this time, and let dragon blood spill over the black sand inside the crown. Gold fire rose. Lysara understood. He was not offering her as witness. He was offering himself. Maelor cried out, "Your Majesty, royal blood cannot witness its own theft. It will burn blind." Aurelian did not look away from the crown. "Then it will have help only if she chooses." Every eye turned to Lysara. No command. No law. No trap. Only choice. The difference nearly broke her. She stepped beside him and placed her marked wrist near his bleeding palm, not touching the crown yet. "Shared witness," she said. Maelor whispered, "It has never been done with a crown." Lysara looked at the old chronist. Most things in this court seemed to have been done wrong. Aurelian's breath almost became a laugh. Then, the hourglass opened. Black sand rose from the crown in hooked threads. They plunged into Aurelian's chest, and he went rigid, teeth clenched against a sound he refused to give the court. Lysara touched his blood with her marked wrist. Pain struck them both. She felt the crown on his head through years, cold weight during coronations, tightening during councils, draining during fevers, feeding Corvain whenever Aurelian sat the throne too long. She felt Aurelian learning to hide weakness because every visible wound became a political calculation. She felt his loneliness sharpened into command until even pain had to kneel before the crown. Beside her, Aurelian saw through her witness too. The kitchen knife in coals, her mother's trembling hands, the little girl biting cloth while the hour mark burned and returned by morning. The years Lysara spent hiding her wrist under ink-stained sleeves, learning that survival meant being useful enough to keep, but invisible enough not to be taken. Their memories touched inside the black sand, not softly, honestly. The crown hooks burned. Aurelian gasped. Lysara nearly fell, but his hand closed around hers, and this time neither of them pulled away. Together, they drew the hooks out. The black threads tore free from his fire one by one, shrieking like insects in flame. The altered crown cracked wider. Gold light poured from Aurelian's chest, wild but living. Lysara guided it through the hourglass, forcing the relic to show every hook, every theft, every name tied to the crown's corruption. The court saw all of it. There would be no burying this in kinder language. When the last hook came free, the crown collapsed into black sand and dead gold. Aurelian staggered. Lysara caught him this time. The throne hall did not laugh. No one dared. The Dragon King rested one hand on her shoulder, breathing hard, alive because the witch they had condemned had chosen truth without surrendering herself to it. Corvain stared at the ruined crown. His ancient face twisted with despair. "You have no crown," he whispered. Aurelian slowly straightened. "No," he said, "I have a witness." The bone hourglass flared. Above the hall, tomorrow's moon changed again. This time, it showed no death. It showed a throne without a crown, a king without stolen years, and a time-blood woman standing beside him while the court knelt not because she demanded it, but because the truth had left them nowhere else to stand. For one breath, the dragon court looked ready to kneel. Then fear remembered its pride. A lord near the eastern pillar dropped first, but not onto both knees. One hand touched the marble, his head bowed just enough to survive the moment without surrendering fully. A priest followed, then 2 guards. Then half the court bent in fragments, each person trying to decide whether truth was safer than denial. Lysara saw the difference. They were not honoring her. They were calculating the direction of power. Aurelian saw it too. His hand remained on her shoulder, not heavily, not claiming, but steady enough that the court understood he was not ashamed to stand beside the woman they had dragged in chains. Corvain laughed from the floor. It was a thin, ruined sound, dry with age and black sand. "Look at them. They kneel because the hourglass frightened them. By morning they will call it witchcraft again. Give them a night, cousin. Give them one closed door. They will decide the crown was corrupted by her blood. that your fire was restored by seduction, that I was old because she made me old. Lysara hated that he was right enough to hurt. Truth revealed was not truth protected. Aurelian lowered his hand from her shoulder and faced the court. His restored dragonfire glowed beneath his skin in controlled golden lines, no longer leaking, no longer dimming when Corvain breathed. But his face held no triumph. "Bring chains," he ordered. The guards moved toward Corvain. The old prince smiled. "Yes, bind the ugly thing. Let them cheer justice and forget the ledgers." "Not for him," Aurelian said. The guards stopped. The king's gaze moved across the council lords, the chronists, the priests, the noble houses whose seals had burned in stolen time records. For every person named by the hourglass, panic entered the hall all at once. Lord Savin struggled under guard. "Your Majesty, you cannot imprison half your own court during succession crisis." Aurelian looked at the cracked crown, now dead gold and black sand on the pedestal. "There is no succession crisis. There is a treason crisis." Another lord shouted, "You have no crown." Aurelian's eyes flashed. "Then perhaps you will find it harder to hide behind mine." The bone hourglass pulsed. Black gold sand rose from the broken crown and formed a ring around the hall. It did not bind the innocent. It moved only toward those whose names had appeared in the death ledgers. Thin bands of sand wrapped around wrists, throats, fingers that had signed orders, mouths that had sworn false recovery rights. Some screamed, some pleaded, some denied everything, until the sand tightened and projected their own signatures in fire above their heads. Lysara swayed. Aurelian noticed immediately. Enough. The hourglass stilled at his voice, but not because he commanded it, because his blood and hers had already given witness. The record was complete. Maelor remained on his knees near the ledgers, black numbers still crawling faintly under his skin. Aurelian turned to him. "You will read every stolen year aloud." Maelor bowed his head. "Yes, Your Majesty. Not as apology, as record. Yes. And when you reach a name tied to your own hand, you will not lower your voice." The old chronist trembled. "I understand." Corvain tried to rise. His ancient body failed him. Two guards lifted him by the arms, but he looked only at Lysara. "You think this frees you?" he whispered. "You are more valuable now than any crown. They will hunt you from fear, beg you from desperation, worship you when useful, burn you when not." Aurelian's jaw tightened, but Lysara answered first. "I know." Corvain's smile faltered. She stepped closer despite the pain in her wrist. "That is why I will not belong to the court that feared me, the king I saved, or the relic that woke for my blood." The hall went silent. Aurelian looked at her then, and something in his face changed. Not hurt exactly. Something sharper. Respect cutting through the first instinct to hold on. Lysara met his eyes. "If I stay, it will be because I choose it, not because truth made me useful." Aurelian bowed his head once. "Before the court, before Corvain, before the hourglass, then the first law of this new record is yours." The words struck the hall harder than fire. A witch, low-born and accused, had been asked to write the first boundary after exposing the court's stolen time. Lysara's throat tightened, but she did not let the emotion soften her voice. "No time. Blood witness may be forced to touch a relic, ledger, crown, death record, or royal body under threat of law, execution, protection, debt, or devotion." A murmur moved through the court. Aurelian looked at Maelor. "Write it." The chronist obeyed with shaking hands. Lysara added, "And any witness may refuse a king." This time, the court gasped. Aurelian did not. He looked at her as if the sentence had cost him something and given him something greater. "Write that first," he said. Maelor wrote. The bone hourglass rang once, low and final. The law burned into the air in black gold fire, then sank into every opened ledger. The hourglass accepted it. The dead records accepted it. The altered succession laws, stripped bare and bleeding truth, accepted it. Only then did Lysara allow herself to breathe. Corvain was dragged before the pedestal. He looked ancient enough to be a dead king dug from the wrong tomb, yet hatred still kept him upright. Aurelian faced him. "Prince Corvain Vire, you stole years from your king, murdered truth through altered time, corrupted succession law, and prepared a witness to carry your crime. You will not be executed. Corvain's eyes narrowed. You will be kept alive by the exact years you stole, Aurelian said. Every day, one ledger will be read before you. Every night, the Bone Hourglass will return one memory of what you took. You wanted to live through my death until it belonged to you. Now you will live through your theft until it belongs to history. For the first time, Corvain looked truly afraid. Not of pain, of duration, of time no longer obeying him. The hourglass turned toward him, and a single grain of black sand entered his chest. He screamed once, hoarse and broken, as the first stolen fever returned to his mind. Aurelian turned away before the scream ended. He looked at Lysara. The court waited for him to name her savior, royal witness, protected witch, anything that would make her part of his possession. Instead, he asked, "Will you walk out of this hall with me?" The question was quiet enough that it should not have carried. It carried anyway. Lysara looked at the doors where she had been dragged in barefoot and chained, then at the hourglass, then at the king who had learned, painfully, not to command her answer. "Yes," she said, "this once." Aurelian offered his arm. She did not take it. Not yet. She walked beside him on her own feet. The dragon court parted. No one touched her. No one dared call her witch like an insult. Behind them, the bone hourglass held its sand perfectly still, and tomorrow's moon faded from inside the glass. For the first time, it showed morning. Morning waited beyond the throne hall doors, but it did not come gently. It entered through the high windows in thin gray lines, touching broken ledgers, shattered bone glass, dead gold from the ruined crown, and the black sand stains left across the marble like shadows that had forgotten how to leave. The dragon court stood behind Lysara and Aurelian in a silence too shaken to become obedience yet. That was all right. Obedience had built too many graves in this palace. Lysara walked barefoot through the doors she had been dragged through hours before. Her wrist still burned where the hour-shaped mark glowed beneath torn skin. The old scar her mother had made around it remained, but it no longer looked like a failed hiding place. It looked like proof that someone had tried to save her before she knew what she carried. Aurelian walked beside her without crown or cloak. That changed the way the guards looked at him. Not less fearfully, more honestly. A king without a crown could not be mistaken for ceremony. He was only a man with dragon fire under his skin, blood on his palm, and the weight of years returned too quickly to a body that had nearly forgotten how to hold them. At the end of the outer hall, he stopped. So did Lysara. Below them, the palace courtyard had filled with people, servants, guards, lesser scribes, kitchen workers, stable boys, chronist apprentices, those who never saw trials until the verdict had already been turned into gossip and law. They looked up at the Dragon King and the woman the court had named Time Blood Thief. Aurelian turned to the captain of the guard. "Bring Corvain to the lower steps. Bring Maelor with the ledgers." The captain bowed and obeyed. Lysara looked at him. "You will do this before everyone?" "Yes. Not only the houses. The houses learned to lie in private. The people paid for it in public." She had no answer to that. A few minutes later, Corvain was brought out in dragonbone chains. Age had bent him, but hatred still kept his eyes sharp. Maelor followed with the first death ledger clutched against his chest, his hands marked with black dates. The crowd stirred when they saw the false heir. Some whispered in confusion. Some cried out. Aurelian raised one hand. The courtyard fell still. "I was dying," he said, voice carrying over stone and morning mist. "You were told it was sickness. You were told my fire weakened naturally. You were told Prince Corvain would inherit because the bloodline demanded stability." He looked at Corvain. Those were lies. Maelor opened the ledger with trembling hands and began to read. One stolen favor. One false recovery. One altered death date. Then another. Then another. With each line, the bone hourglass, carried by 4 guards behind them, released a grain of blacks. The crowd saw Corvain near the throne. Corvain in the archive. Corvain drinking gold fire from Aurelian's breath. Corvain watching the king collapse and calling it court illness. No noble could soften it. No priest could rename it. No chronist could dress it in lawful ink. By the 7th stolen year, people had begun to weep. Not for the court, for themselves. Because if the king's own life could be measured, drained, and rewritten, then no one beneath him had ever been safe from records made by powerful hands. Aurelian let them feel that. Then he spoke again. Lysara Ven did not steal my years. She revealed where they had gone. She did not cause my death. She broke the path prepared for it. The crowd turned toward her. Lysara felt the old instinct to step back. She did not. Aurelian did not touch her, did not pull her forward, did not make her into a symbol because he needed one. He simply left space beside him and let the people look. Her choice to stand there became visible. That mattered. Corvain lifted his head. Pretty words. But when the next king grows afraid of death, he will seek her blood. When the next council fears uncertainty, they will hunt time, blood again. You cannot change hunger with one morning. Lysara looked at him. No, she said, but hunger can be recorded. The bone hourglass turned toward her. This time, she did not bleed. She reached for the nearest ledger and tore out the blank final page. Then she pressed it against the hourglass glass, over the place where tomorrow's moon had been. Black gold letters appeared. No royal death may be witnessed by force. No time-blood heir may be bound to crown, court, relic, or death record. No succession may be settled by hidden years. No witness may be named cause without challenge. She looked at Aurelian. He read every line. Then he took the page and signed it in dragon blood. Not as command over her, as binding over himself. The letters burned gold. They lifted into the morning air and spread across the palace walls, sinking into stone, ledgers, court seals, archive doors, and finally the broken crown itself. The old crown cracked one final time. From its dead gold rose every year it had helped steal, not as life to be returned, but as record, names, dates, signatures, witness marks, council approvals. They burned above the courtyard until no one could claim ignorance. Aurelian faced Corvain. You will live. Corvain's mouth twisted. Not as heir, not as prince, not as prisoner hidden from sight. Every dawn, a stolen year will be read before you. Every night, the hourglass will return the memory of what you took. You will keep all your time. The old prince flinched. Aurelian's voice lowered. Since you loved it so much, the guards dragged Corvain away. He did not scream this time. That was worse. He understood the sentence. Maelor remained. The old chronist fell to his knees before Lysara first, not Aurelian. I knew your mother. Lysara went still. Aurelian's eyes sharpened, but he said nothing. Maelor bowed his head until it touched the stone. She begged me to hide you. I told myself silence was mercy. Then I let Corvain use the law built from that silence. Lysara felt the knife of it enter quietly. Not all betrayals came from hatred. Some came from fear wearing the face of kindness. What was her name? She asked. Maelor looked up, tears cutting through ash on his face. Marin Ven, last of the Western time, bloodline. The name moved through Lysara like a door opening inside her chest. Marin. Her mother had been more than frightened hands and a hot knife in coals, more than a whisper, better scarred than found. She had been a name, a line. A woman who knew time always returned. Lysara turned to Aurelian. Write it. He understood. A fresh page was brought. Maelor wrote Marin Ven's name first, then Lysara's, then every time-blood family he remembered, and every one the ledgers could still reveal, not as criminals, not as relics. As witnesses hunted because they made theft visible. The page filled. Then another. Then another. By the time the sun rose fully, the palace walls held a new record. Not complete, but begun. Only then did Aurelian pick up what remained of the crown. It was broken beyond wearing, blackened inside, emptied of hidden sand. He carried it to the courtyard brazier and placed it in the fire. The court watched the symbol of stolen rule melt. When it was gone, he turned back to the people. I will not wear another crown until every altered death ledger has been read, every stolen year recorded, and every hand that signed Corvain's succession has answered. A lord shouted from the steps, Then what are you without a crown? Aurelian looked toward Lysara, then back at the crowd. Responsible. The word settled heavier than gold. Later, when the courtyard had emptied into frightened work, and the ledgers had been carried under guard to the open archive, Lysara stood alone beside the bone hourglass. Its sand was still. For once, it asked nothing from her. Aurelian approached slowly, stopping several steps away. "You can leave," he said. She looked at him. "I know. I can send guards with you. You just wrote a law against making protection another chain." "I said I can. Not that I will, unless you ask." That made her look down despite herself. Silence stretched between them, but it was not empty. It held everything neither of them could make simple. His court chaining her blood saving him, his life restored through pain they had shared, the dangerous warmth of his hand around hers when the stolen years returned. "You are still weak," she said. "Yes, you still have enemies. Yes, you still need the ledgers witnessed. Yes." Her eyes narrowed. "You are making it very hard to leave cleanly." Aurelian's mouth softened, not quite a smile. "That was not my intention." "No?" "No, my intention was to tell the truth badly and hope you heard the part beneath it." Her chest tightened. "And what part is that?" He lowered his gaze for a breath, as if choosing not the safest words, but the most honest ones. "I do not want you beside me because the court needs you," he said. "I want you beside me because when death was written for me, you asked who held the pen." Lysara looked at him for a long moment. No crown, no command, no careful ceremony. Only a king who had almost become a corpse in his own records, asking without reaching. "I will not be your court witness," she said. "I know. I will not bleed whenever your nobles become afraid. I know. And if I stay, I decide when I touch the hourglass." Aurelian's eyes held hers. "You decide whether you touch anything at all." The bone hourglass glowed faintly between them. Lysara stepped closer. "Not all the way. Enough. Then I will stay until the ledgers are opened." Aurelian bowed his head once. "Thank you. And after that I may leave." "Yes. And if I return?" His voice lowered. "Then I will be here." The simplicity of it hurt. Lysara looked at her wrist. The hour-shaped mark still glowed under the scar her mother had made. Once she had thought the mark meant she would always be hunted. Now it meant she would always know when time had been made to lie. Outside, morning filled the palace stones. Inside the bone hourglass, the black sand finally began to fall. Not upward, not backward, forward, slowly, cleanly. For the first time, it was not counting down to Aurelian's death. It was counting the first hour no one had stolen.